help you? Do you have a reservation?
Would it be possible to talk to Sonny?
Hey gang, Todd here. It's been a while since we've looked at a TV show, and since it's September and everybody's heading back to school, who better to head back to school with than the Hardy Boys? This was a TV show from 1977. Technically it was the Hardy Boys Nancy Drew Mysteries for the first season. First two seasons, I think. Parker Stevenson and Sean Cassidy played Frank and Joe Hardy. Sean Cassidy, of course, became a teen idol for a while with his recording, much like his brother David. He had a brief pop career. His were mostly remakes of 60s songs like The Do Run Run. And playing Nancy Drew was Pamela Sue Martin. Now, this was set up like the Mystery Wheels from the early 70s, where you'd have Columbo one week, McLeod the next, then you'd have McMillan and wife, and so on. Here you'd have one week it'd be a Hardy Boys mystery. Next week it'd be Nancy Drew. And that's how it ran for the first season. And then in the second season they had a team-up 2-part episode where all three of them investigated together. And unfortunately, Martin, who was, I think, the oldest of the cast among those three, she did not like the rather juvenile scripts that they were doing. So she left the show about halfway through the second season. So there were more Hardy Boy episodes than there were Nancy Drew, and at the end of the second season they brought in a new actress to play Nancy Drew for another team-up, and then the third season it was just the Hardy Boys, in which they went from being teen amateur sleuths to government agents. Not my favorite season of the show. My favorite is the first season, where they had kind of more spooky kind of mysteries. Second season they started to get more into espionage type stuff as that season went along, and then they just went full-edged cops and robbers type stuff, which was what most other shows were. Of course, I'm sure Martin felt better when she played the more adult character of, I believe it was Fallon, in the nighttime soap Dynasty. Or so we hope. Anyway, the first episode was a Hardy Boys mystery, the mystery of the haunted house. And we opened with Frank and Joe following their father to a cemetery while he examines a grave for some reason. Having noticed that some bad-looking men have been following their father while everybody's watching their father in the graveyard, they slip back, and Joe manages to lift a print off a packet of cough drops from their car. And then they head home, where we get to see their super snazzy little crime lab they've set up in the basement.
There's just too many possibilities. I can't find any one new case that stands out.
I got a beauty that stands out here. Take a look at that.
It looks like a thumbprint.
It being late, their Aunt Gertrude sends them off to bed. They are teenagers after all. Meanwhile, their father Fenton is stopped by the men who are following him, and they take him to an undisclosed spot where we get some classic tough guy private eye dialogue.
You've been investigating the grave of a man named Bronson. Why?
Because I was hired to, that's why.
What has Bronson to do with your client?
My client's interests are confidential.
Not anymore.
Who is your client?
That also is confidential.
Getting nowhere with Fenton. He's just too tough a nut to crack. They decide to break into the house, and we get an almost action scene.
They're coming in. Frank, look out!
Wow, that was almost exciting. Anyway, Frank gives chase, loses them, but somebody else finds him.
Son, we'd like a word with you.
Back at the house, we get a very amusing scene of talking back and forth where the boys try to explain what's going on, how their father was supposed to be on a fishing trip but he didn't actually go, and they've been following him, and that Joe lifted a fingerprint from a cough drop box, and then the men broke in and Joe's lifted another fingerprint off the filing cabinet, which he sure will match the other one, and they're just and back and forth on, and their Aunt Gertrude's like, when did all this happen? Anyway, the police say they'll check back and see if their father has returned or not, and they tell Frank next time he wants to chase someone, put some pants on first. But the conversation did remind Frank of something: their father's bedside diary.
Look, Bronson, Emmetsville Cemetery. That's where we follow Dad. It's an abbreviation. I can't read it for sure, but I think it says Haunted House in Brookdale, Tuesday, 2 a.m. sunny.
And you know what day it is? Monday. But it's after midnight. Technically, Tuesday. So, they get dressed, grab their van with their bikes inside, and head to this haunted house, where they see an amazing themed nightclub where you have to go through a pretty crazy maze to get there.
Child could get out of this place. Simply,
We better find a child. Now we're getting someplace.
well, now what?
This is what. Aha! Hey, there's stairs. Wow.
This is getting monotonous. It's not very reassuring. Wonder how long he's been stuck in here.
Well, after meeting the Frankensteinian maitre d', played by the great Richard Kyle, you probably recognized him in the opening clip. Anyway, they take a couple seats and asked her waitress if they could talk to Sonny. And Sonny, it turns out, isn't too thrilled to talk to them.
Yeah, I think we found Sonny.
I don't think he's exactly excited about seeing us either.
Let's go.
We get a chase around the outside of the establishment, and then Frank finds Sonny.
Hey, what's the matter with you?
What do you want with me? Who are you?
Who are you? What do you want with my father?
Your father.
Yeah, Fenton Hardy. You're supposed to be meeting him here?
You're Fenton Hardy's son.
Yeah, and I'm worried about him.
How did you find out about me?
Hey, that's Roger Davis of Dark Shadows fame. Cool. Anywho, looks like Frank's going to be able to get some information from him when Sonny gets spooked.
I gotta get out of here.
You're not going anywhere until you tell me about my father. My father could be in trouble for helping you.
You set me up, you...
The plot thickens. Well, Sonny runs off, and Joe comes out to see. Well, I shouldn't say comes out. He comes from around the house. He hadn't had much luck. Frank tells him to wait at the nightclub in case their father shows up. If he doesn't, follow him. He's going to chase after Sonny. While this is happening, Fenton Hardy shows why he is one of the great detectives of his era.
I'd say you're about to show me your badges.
Badges?
CIA, FBI, military intelligence. I'd say Navy first. The shoes, the haircut. You've got a Navy insignia on your lighter.
Yep, pretty slick there, huh? They are Navy intelligence. Seems the person Bronson, who grave he was investigating, had been part of NATO. And he was privy to a lot of top secret information. And one day he disappeared for 48 hours. They found him wandering in his underwear. No memory of who he was or what had happened. But locked up in that head, a lot of secrets. They want to know what happened. Fortunately, after a few days in observation, he escaped from the hospital. And they've been looking for him ever since. I think it's pretty obvious to everybody that Sonny is Bronson. The plan had been to fake his death, hence the fake headstone, and then he would be put into protective custody, change of identity, all that. Except he ran off, which now makes him look rather suspicious. So, Fenton says, I'll go get him and bring him in. Of course, after he leaves, they're going to have him followed. And they're also going to call to get that grave erased. Well, Joe stays until closing time, at which point, because Frank had the cash for them, he can't pay for the burgers he ate. So he gives them his ID and his watch, tells them they may have to call the police. Runs out, gets his bike out of the back of his van, runs up the hill, finds Frank, and they realize Sonny's gone back down, followed by this man. They all end up breaking into the closed nightclub. Another big chase through the maze, and then they escape, and Sonny tries to explain some things.
So who's trying to hurt you?
The one who really sold us out.
Who's that?
I don't know.
I think you do. I think you can identify the man. I think that's why he's after you.
Don't you see? If I tell you, he's gonna have to come after you too.
Meanwhile, Fenton returns to the cemetery to gather his evidence. Just like in the books, Fenton cannot go 5 minutes without getting abducted. Anyway, Frank calls Aunt Gertrude on their CBs. Remember when that was big? I do. And is notified their father is no longer missing, and he's going to get some evidence. Frank and Joe surmise it must be the cemetery, and they head there. Frank says he'll go look around. He gets out of the van. Joe jumps out and follows him. When Frank finds this out, he says, "Go back. You have to watch Sonny, otherwise he might leave." Oh, Joe didn't think of that. So Joe heads back, and Frank makes an interesting discovery the hard way. Turns out, that was the grave. Anyway, Frank unties his father. Unfortunately, Frank has twisted his ankle and can't climb out. His father says he'll go out and get help. Climbs out. Now, while Joe was heading back to the van, our mystery man shows up, and we get our confrontation between him and Sonny.
Hello, Will.
Hello, Commander.
It pains me to be here now like this. You were a son to me.
I felt the same. You were like the father I never had. Acted out.
You shouldn't put anyone too high on a pedestal, Will. We're all human. If you'd only given me the chance to explain.
How could you explain selling us out?
I was being blackmailed for something I did, Will. Something human. But it was going to cost me everything.
Sadly, realizing that Will is starting to regain his memory and would never go along with what he's done, the commander pulls a gun out and takes Will to his car so he can dispose of him somewhere else. About this time, Joe showed up. And apparently, he's a big fan of Dirty Harry and the movie Bullet.
Joe, wait a minute. Hold it. Where are you going?
Well, now it's a foot race. Back to the cemetery. And we get one of those oh so ironic wrap-ups.
Hi there.
And then, while everybody's having coffee back at the Hardy place with the Navy men and Will, we get the usual denouement of they actually didn't suspect Will at all. They suspected the commander, but with Will's amnesia, they couldn't prove it. Will's escaping was happenstance that they decided to use to their advantage to draw the commander out. And now that Will has his memory back and is exonerated, he can return to the Navy as a hero. And then we get a cute little ha-ha moment between the two Hardy Boys and their father's secretary they both have a crush on.
My hero.
Hey, when am I? Chopped liver over here?
The 70s with those cutesy endings. And did you not thrill at that 70s hairstyle, the feathered look that everybody, well, the boys at least sported? My brothers actually had those hairstyles back in the 70s. I did not. My hair is flat, limp, and extremely straight. Back then, I had the Mo Howard look. Anyway, this was a fairly good series for, young adults, tweens, I should say. I mean, it was based on a series of books that were that most people usually read between grade school and junior high, or, about 7 or 8 to about 12 or 13. And the show kind of mimicked that kind of setting for the show. They were it was a juvenile show. Your protagonists were teenagers. And Stevenson and Cassidy, they played well off each other. They had a good on-screen chemistry. And the scriptwriters gave them a lot of really amusing banter between the two of them, kind of like brothers would have. And this show was what got me into reading the Hardy Boy books, and I read a ton of them. My mom was happy I was reading them at first because my brothers weren't really big readers. And my mom was, and she wanted us all to be big readers. And then, I'm reading. Oh, that's great. Can you read something else now? Unfortunately, my something else was then The Three Investigators, and then I moved on to Leslie Charteris and Arthur Conan Doyle, and then I moved on to Ellery Queen, Agatha Christie, and then I discovered hard-boiled fiction in high school. Dashiell Hammett, Raymond Chandler, and the one that my mother really didn't like that I've started reading, Mickey Spillane. I became a huge Spillane fan, and that kind of bothered her because if you've ever read Mickey Spillane, it's very violent and very upfront in its sexuality. But that's neither here nor there. I loved the show as a kid, and it holds up pretty well as a period piece because this could only be the 70s with the styles and the fashions. But the mysteries are good. They're not overly complicated. It's more of they kind of get dropped into something. They kind of nose around, and there's no big gathering the suspects together and you are the killer like you would get with Hercule Poirot or Ellery Queen or one of those. And the action's kind of moderate, nothing too violent. This was aimed after kids, and I kind of appreciate that they did that because not everything has to be something for adults. TV is something that should have something for everyone, and this was a pretty good example of that for the 70s. And these were cultural icons that had been around almost 30 to 35 years at that point, so everyone would have been familiar with these characters. And it was a popular show at first, but as time went on, it began to take on a more generic look and feel. There wasn't much difference between this and Hawaii Five-O and Mannix and all the other cop shows that were on at the time. Which is a shame, because it had a great start. And it made Stevenson, Cassidy, and Master Martin pop culture icons of the time. Even if Martin didn't really enjoy that part of it. But they all went on to have good careers, acting, directing, producing. Cassidy gave us the great American Gothic back in the I believe that was the 90s, early 2000s, somewhere around in there. And of course, Parker Stevenson went on to do Baywatch with The Hoff. And Pamela Sue Martin, she got to do one of those very dramatic roles when she starred in The Woman in Red, which was about, it was a fictionalized account of the woman who was with John Dillinger the night he was shot down by the FBI. Although that's only like the last quarter of the movie, maybe last third, is her relationship with Dillinger. The rest is, it's a very extreme film with violence and nudity, so I'm not going to go too far into it. It is, but never mind. She got to play the lead, and I'm sure from a dramatic point of view that was very satisfying. Well, there's not much else I have to say about this. It was a show that I enjoyed when I was a kid, and one that I think does hold up well. And of course, who doesn't like a great cameo of Richard Kyle in Frankenstein makeup? Anyway, please hit like, share, and subscribe, and stay after the credits for my favorite scene.
Did he say trouble on back?
That's what he said.
Hey, Madge, this could be bad for business. Listen, keep it under your hat. We don't want to scare anybody.